Welcome to this edition of CBN News Weekend. I'm Charlene Aaron. Well, it's been a week of highs and lows for the people of the Christian community as we celebrate the release of prisoners from Iran and mourn the deaths of Christians in Burkina Faso. Christians around the world are celebrating the return of Pastor Saeed Abedini. Abedini was held hostage by the Iranian regime for 3.5 years. And for the first time since his release last weekend, we heard directly from Saeed about what it's like for him to finally be free. Jay Sekulow of the American Center for Law and Justice spoke with Saeed by phone.
Let me ask you, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Today was like my first day, of my life. So I found I was born again.
Yeah.
So being born again.
Pastor Saeed is an American citizen who was thrown in prison by the Islamic regime of Iran for charges relating to his Christian faith. Well, American missionary Mike Riddering was one of 29 people killed in a terrorist attack in West Africa last week. The 45-year-old missionary from Florida had lived in Burkina Faso for 5 years. His work with widows and orphans had become his life's passion, a big change from the way he lived just a decade ago. One day, while driving his pickup truck, he made the decision to live for Christ. And I spoke with Jeff Rittering about how his brother's life was radically transformed by the love of God. First of all, deepest condolences from all of us here at CBN News. How did you hear about your brother's death?
Amy, Mike's wife, told me. But obviously, for many hours before that, I knew that there was a real good possibility that he had been killed.
Tell us about Mike and his faith.
Well, it's kind of an interesting thing. He's a man full of joy, specifically faith. About 11 years ago, he made a decision for Christ that changed his life. He encountered God in his pickup truck. And he was going down the street one day, and he calls me on the phone. He's still pulled over the side of the road, and he said, "Jeff, I think I'm going to hell." I says, "No, you're not. You grew up in a Christian family and everything. Are you sure?" And he says, "No, I don't love God." And I said, "Well, what's happening?" He says, I think I'm about ready to love God. I'll call you back." So he radically changed that day. Everybody knows it. Everybody in the church, his whole family, everybody knows what would happen in that truck.
Oh,
he was
wow.
filled with God's love in a real powerful way. And he got busy. I mean, he had a boat business. He was making a little bit of money, and he started working half-time. And he was working half-time in the church. They called him Pastor Mike. Even though he wasn't ordained, he gave himself fully to the different needs that were going on, the needy. He became the youth pastor. He was on the school board. The Christian school board. He did all the outreaches. He oversaw all that. And then he came to me one day and he said, because I had been doing work in Africa for about 10 years at that time, he came to me and he said, "Jeff, God just told me I'm going to Africa. I'm gonna dig wells in Africa."
Wow.
I said, "Mike, I don't think so, man. Are you sure?" He said, "Yeah, no, I am." I said, "You're doing fine in America. You don't have to go." "No, I'm supposed to go. I've got to go. I believe the Lord wanted me to go to Africa." I said, "Okay, all right." And
wow.
you can go. He went there humbly, thinking that he was only going to dig wells, but he did everything else,
Well, tell us a little bit about the work that he and his wife were doing there in West Africa.
Well, about 15 years ago, the church that I was a part of started a missions organization called Sheltering Wings. And it's based here in St. Louis, where I am actually right now. And that was a really incredible time. We were trying to get our feet really in West Africa. I've been to this little town in West Africa, Yako, probably only 30,000 people, for about 14 times now. I go every year. And as I was down there, I was helping a woman named Ruth Cox just kind of get established a little bit with the connections and the resources from America. And Amazing work was happening there, unbelievable work, where there was just actual love, God's love for the people of Africa. And people fell in love with the people of Africa. I did. And so I think my brother wanted to kind of, do that as well, as his heart was just bursting with the Father's heart.
Wow.
And he went over to this little village and in Africa, and he basically took over the whole operation. Amazing. He was in charge of all the Tom's distribution. He created a women's, like emergency shelter thing, and then he did a women's program where he trained women that had been kicked out of their courtyards because of dishonor or whatever, and with their children, and then he took them in and he helped them, trained them, gave them a diploma after 6 months, and they get jobs. And he did, of course, an orphanage. They have a sponsorship program there with more than 400, I believe, orphans. They have an orphanage there for the ones that actually could not be supported in any way by extended family. Mostly they had special needs and needed medical attention. They did medical stuff. They have a clinic there.
Wow.
He was involved in experimental farming methods to try to help them because they're an agricultural society. He took what he knew from Florida and, water and digging wells, but he also did fish farms and hydroponics and experimental, projects to try to figure out ways to help them.
What an amazing man.
You can't even talk about all the things that he did over there. It's just, he was involved in everything.
He sounds like an amazing man, Jeff. He really does sound amazing.
Sure.
And we just, his wife, Amy, and his children, how are they doing?
Amy is still trying to keep things going over there, as you can imagine. He's very, very loved here in America, but he's loved more in Africa. And there are people coming to Amy and giving their, condolences, and that's a full-time job right now, I think, for her. Plus, she still has to take care of the orphanage and run that stuff. So she's very distracted, I think. But at the same time, I probably had 400 instant messages with her. Mostly we talk through instant messages, and sometimes she'll just say, "I can't breathe. I just can't. I don't know if I can do this." And then the next time she'll text and she'll say, "You just can feel the grace of the Lord." And she said, "I could feel the prayers and the support." And so it's going to be a hard process. The first day, as soon as we found out Saturday that my brother had been killed, we flew his daughters, biological daughters, to my house. They're actually at my house right now. And so we've been loving on them ever since. And that's been hard. I mean, last night it was really hard. My wife is an amazing woman, and she's just been loving on them, feeding them as well. And she's there with them right now.
Jeff shared memories of his brother with us, and he also had some encouraging words for the church and Christians facing persecution. Many are calling Mike a modern-day martyr. What are your thoughts on that?
I've heard people say that. I think, I think there was a specific attack on people that could potentially bring in, the gospel. Maybe that was the case by killing the nationals and targeting them. Some people that were different. Certainly he was exercising his faith over there. That's the reason why he went, and he was killed over there. So maybe definitionally he is a martyr. I don't know if he would agree with that, but I think I do, and I'm still kind of testing that word out as it relates to my brother. But he's certainly a modern day solution to the anger and the fear that's in America. We think about terrorism and we think, well, how are we going to deal with that? How are we going to, I'm supposed to go on Fox News tonight. How are we going to deal with terrorism? And, I don't know if they're going to let me say this. I mean, obviously you will. But the solution to fear is love. The solution to mistrust and anger is love. And God gives us that solution. Sometimes we try to make it some sort of mass solution, but really, at the very least, it could be one-on-one love. My brother loves some Muslims over there. I have their names. I know who they are.
So, Jeff, I want to ask this question to you because you're right in the vein of where I wanted to go. You know, young missionaries who may now be hesitant to go and serve in light of what happened to your brother.
No fear. You know, the Great Commission was very, very clear, right? But then you got Joshua 1:9, you know, do what I've commanded to you. I'm going to be with you every step of the way. You know, don't be afraid. You know, you trust me, you know, and you go. And that's it. My brother would be crazy right now if people were afraid of going and loving and going where God calls them to go. We must go. If we're not able to make disciples, we're not part of the solution. If we're not able to share God's love, we cannot possibly be a part of the solution.
And Jeff, how do you think this tragedy will impact the missions work that Mike was doing?
I don't know yet. I don't know yet. I don't think, I don't know. I know that it's either going to cause people to be more afraid or it's going to cause people to love more. I don't know how the people are going to respond. But I do know that when my brother was in that pickup truck, he was an alcoholic. He was just a normal guy. He was a workaholic. He wasn't the greatest father. He wasn't the greatest husband. And then he got transformed by his love. He became one that could carry that love.
Amen.
He was a carrier of love. You know, my brother's best love, even after he made a decision for Christ, was not the solution. My brother's best righteousness and works was not the solution. But now he became a carrier of God's love.
Amen.
He just went over there. He had neighbors, he had people. There are thousands of people that knew my brother in Africa. I'm telling you, it's a lot easier to make friends over there than it is over